is the matchmaker for clauses. It is the thing that signals causal relationships between ideas. There are two major clauses, the independent clause and the dependent clause. The independent clause can stand on its own. It makes complete sense on its own. The dependent clause leaves you hanging. It demonstrates that the comma is actually a kind of punctuation chameleon, that it can show up in many different forms, that it can be parentheses, it can be a serial comma, it can create dependent clauses. It has a lot of usages, so we call it the chameleon punctuation mark. Well, actually, no one else calls it that but me. Why do we care about comma? One comma cost Rogers $2.13 million. Commas can ruin a perfectly good party. With the Oxford comma, you host a party, maybe like the English party from last night. You may want to invite strippers, JFK, and Stalin. And you can with the Oxford comma. Without the Oxford comma, you invite the strippers, who are JFK and Stalin. If you see them, they're not very attractive strippers. So the Oxford comma, in its most basic definition, is the comma used immediately before a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunctions are and, or, and nor. They create a list of things. So commas save lives. Can act as parentheses. In their chameleon form, they can take on very different meanings. Parentheses adds additional information to a main sentence or independent clause. So you can use three different types. You can use commas, you can use brackets, or you can use dashes. All three are interchangeable. So a dash and a hyphen walk into a bar, and a fight breaks out. The hyphen jumps in and starts throwing punches. The dash, on the other hand, separates the crowd, tries to break up the fight. Why is this funny?
Because the hyphen connects things together.
A hyphen is a joiner. Hyphens join into things, and dashes separate things to maintain clarity. Speaking of separators, let's talk about the ellipsis. It is an innocuous-looking series of 3 dots. You will only use the ellipsis in formal writing for quotations. You will only do it when you are citing a piece of work and you would like to give a shortened or contracted quotation. Apostrophes have 2 different uses. The first one is a possessive, and the second one is a contraction. Do not use contractions in any single essay or formal writing. Its is not a word. ITS apostrophe. It is actually a logical impossibility. It is singular and therefore cannot have a plural possessive. Period. Apostrophes can make you look foolish. If you do not master the difference between an apostrophe, a contraction, and a plural possessive, you will look ridiculous. This distinction between there, and there is also related to contractions versus possessive. And it is a very common form of typos and of misspellings. Same with your and your. Your is possessive, you apostrophe R-E is you-are. Big difference. Colons and semicolons are more stylistically savvy than other forms of punctuation. Do not try to use a colon or semicolon until you've mastered all of the other forms of punctuation. A colon and a semicolon are both joining together clauses. They are both creating causal relationships between clauses. Right. So a colon is used when you make a statement and then you define, clarify, or develop that statement. A semicolon, in its most basic form, takes 2 independent clauses and joins them together to show a relationship. When in doubt, just use a period. More common use of the semicolon is to join clauses using a transition word. These are independent marker words, and the transition words include however, moreover, therefore, for example, etc. Okay, so they're independent marker words. They have a little comma and then introduce another independent. Do not use on the other hand if you have not already used on the one hand. The other hand assumes that you've already listed the first hand. Do not capitalize after a colon or a semicolon unless it is a proper noun. Now on to quotations. Quotation marks are always double quotation marks when you are quoting something. Two quotation marks on either side of the quotation. Where is the period? Inside the quotation marks. Always inside the quotation marks unless you provide a citation and then the period is outside of that citation information. Only use single quotation marks when you are quoting somebody who is already quoting somebody else. Okay, so you want to have this kind of piece of information from a secondary source, but you have to signal that they've also quoted someone. To indent or not to indent, that is the question. There are very specific rules for indentation. Are quoting 4 or more lines of poetry, or there are 4 or more sentences in the body of your essay that are a quotation, you must indent. Poetry, it is indented 10 spaces from the left-hand margin, and she had dropped the quotation marks if you indent a quotation. You then create a period after the final word of the quotation and then provide citation. It is the exact opposite of what you do if the quotation is embedded in the body of your essay. Do not center your quotation. Do not put your quotation in italics. Always indent 10 spaces from the left-hand margin. Always make sure that you replicate exactly the original punctuation and spelling of the quotation, even when that author makes a mistake. You cannot silently revise somebody else's work, even though you'd like to. If you see any sort of error in punctuation or in spelling, use the SIC. I'm going to give you 2 letters. They're exactly the same. They have the exact same words in the exact same order. The only difference is punctuation.